I'm Lindsay Smith with Real Agriculture, and joining me now with Pioneer Seeds Canada is Ashley Knapton. She's the Dairy Strategic Accounts Manager for Pioneer Seeds Canada. Welcome here, Ashley.
Hey, Lindsay, how are you?
I'm doing well. The sun is
Cool.
shining for now. It's been a challenging and very strange spring, and that's maybe where
Yeah.
we'll start.
Mm.
Of course, with dairy, forage is of the utmost importance. That beautiful alfalfa hay that has to be made. First cut looks interesting because I have some first cut that the grass in it is heading out. And the
You got there.
alfalfa, great for the grass. The alfalfa is like, hey, we're also here. How
Yeah.
are farmers handling this first cut decision?
Well, such a really good point, right? Like, I actually got a couple texts earlier this weekend. The last weekend, folks were like, "Hey, my neighbor's cutting hay," and I was like, "Yeah, if it's really high grass, that's very possible because those grasses they just march along. They don't need the same level of heat or even moisture in some cases that our alfalfa does. So we typically run into this. We typically have our grass heads a little bit earlier than our alfalfa, but I think that gap is maybe a little bit more noticeable. The other thing that's really kind of nagging in the back of my mind is that we're looking at folks who are not done all of their spring field work yet, right? And
Yeah.
and because of that challenging spring that you mentioned, so we're going to have these really tough conversations of should you park the planter and cut your hay? Like if you're making it
Mm.
for cows, for lactating cows, that might be a difficult decision that has to be made. I was doing some reading this morning. We look at a loss of about $10 a day in quality
Wow.
in our first cut. And so that's pretty significant, right? When we look at that per acre kind of or that's per ton, I think, losses. That's really significant. So we need to have that conversation with our nutritionist, with our cropping team to say, you know what, for the longevity of our season or our milking herd, we should be taking this first
Right.
cut exactly when we need to, especially to set up our second and third cut as well.
So, yeah, I guess that's my real point on this question for sure is first cut, it's great. It's great feed. That's wonderful. But it's really about setting up that all important second and third cut, really to, get that high octane fuel.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're pushing for fourth cut in the eastern of Ontario, right, or some of those other regions across where maybe
Yeah.
fourth cut is really pushing it, you really can't miss that deadline because we just can't risk delaying it multiple times through these. And if we get a drought, heaven forbid, kind of looking up coming up to the third cut, that could delay cutting again, right? So we really kind of want to stick to that schedule as much as we can. So I guess if we're thinking about how do we decide when to go, the recommendation I generally make is if you're looking at your field, and I don't care what you planted it at because that could have been last year, that could have been 4 years ago, on a per kilogram basis of feed, what is the ratio of grasses to alfalfa? If you're looking at 90% alfalfa, 10% grasses, we're going to focus our harvest timing on that alfalfa because it's going to have the largest influence on that kilogram, that ton, whatever of
Yeah.
feed. But if you're looking at somewhat, maybe it's a little bit more run out stand, maybe you just mix higher grasses in to begin with, you're getting closer to that 60-40. Wow, we're going to have to go a lot earlier than we think based on the alfalfa because you're right, the grasses, we've actually already missed that optimum timing. The
Yep.
quality, we're losing it rapidly there.
Mm-hmm. I won't lie. I wasn't pleased to see heads emerging. They just popped out of nowhere. I swear.
Yeah.
It's been a very strange spring in that way. Now, it also, as you mentioned, it's been a challenge on the corn planting side. The growers you're working with, thinking about silage, is it just as important to do an amazing job at planting with that silage corn as it is with grain corn?
Listen, I'm going to be pretty honest here and say it's even more important, obviously, because
Of
we got
course
to
it
set
is.
our ladies up for success. We got to make
That's
that
right.
corn silage. You're right. It is just as important. I get questions on, should I do anything different in terms of fertility or putting it in certain conditions? No, we really want to grow the best possible crop, whether we're going to combine it or whether we're going to chop it all and put it into cows. There are a few things that really matter, right? We do increase our plant population a little bit because we can handle a little bit lower grain yield for overall tonnage. We want to keep that plant health. It's even almost a little bit more important because obviously plant health on the grain side, it helps with that grain fill. That's great. That's really important. But that plant health also is really important to fiber digestibility on that overall plant, whole plant corn silage. So we really want to maintain that green plant right to the end. So you're right. Just do as good of a job. Certainly challenging this year, right? Don't be running around and slapping it in the ground. You're going to pay for that later. So make the right decision, put it in good quality, and we'll get it done. We always do.
Definitely questions this week. Of do you smear it in or do you
Yeah.
wait? And I'm gonna go on the side of wait.
Yeah,
But there are deadlines to these things. Now, I guess my last question then, with silage, do we have a little bit more wiggle room on the maturity side because we don't have to dry grain? Does
you're
that give
right.
us a bit of a leeway?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we're targeting that 3/4 milk line harvest timing, right, for our silage. If we end up at half, we'll be okay. That's not the end of
Right.
the world. If we get frosted out at half milk lines, so if you were, it's kind of again, it's your little bit your risk tolerance. It's a little bit what maturity you were working with already. If you were pushing your luck on your silage maturity, yeah, we are going to reel that back in, but we are only the 22nd of May. Like we're
Yes,
only just starting to have
totally.
these conversations about
Yeah.
hybrid maturity. If you had a really well adapted hybrid, I'm probably comfortable with it for your silage for another week before we need to start thinking about switching too much. We're gonna be all right.
Okay. You heard it here, folks. We're going to be all right.
Don't
Okay.
put my phone number on the screen.
No,
I'm kidding. I'm
I will
kidding.
not. Okay. All right. Ashley Knapton, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Lindsay.